All right. Well, I'm actually just the support role today. Steve is going to be leading us into this engaging discussion around the ethical implications of AI. And I say discussion because he and I agree that we really do want to invite you all to chime in and chat either out loud or in the chat box throughout the discussion time. Um, and yeah, we'll go ahead and get started because we only have 30 minutes. So thanks so much for being here.
Is this recording?
Yes, we
Oh,
are
okay.
recording. Yeah.
All right. I just
Yep.
didn't get the notification.
Oh,
Yeah.
showing here.
Well, so good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, and yeah, Sarah, I think we're co-presenting, so we worked on this together. But yeah, we really want this to be interactive. So, yeah, just be aware of that. Folks don't talk; they'll just be awkward silence for a while. But yeah. So let's see here. So the kind of just quick agenda here is we will. Whoops. The quick agenda here is we'll just, do a quick definition of ethics, just it's kind of obligatory, I guess, to frame the discussion, and then, let's just talk about some concerns. And we've got, a couple of questions after that to follow up with, and then yeah, some stuff that's a little bit more specific, maybe to Blue Ridge, talking about cybersecurity, those recommended guidelines. So, this just stolen from the dictionary here. So, principles of conduct governing an individual or a group. So this, we want to keep this pretty wide open. So if you have thoughts or concerns that aren't, maybe technically ethics, as far as governing, just bring them out. Yeah, this is an exciting time because we're all kind of, experiencing this new technology grow and affect all of us together. So yeah, and of course, we do want to try to relate it a little bit to ethics or, policy things or considerations that you might have in your job, whether that be faculty or staff. Sarah, was there anything else you wanted to add before we go to the next?
Well, I guess the one thing I'd say is that I think it's important for us to discuss or at least reflect on both our personal ethics around this, but also our ethics as an institution and how we're serving both our students and our community in our approach to generative AI.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
So here we go. So we're just opening it up to the floor. And feel free. So you could either type in the chat window or just feel free to unmute and speak.
I have some ethical concerns with the intellectual property that's been appropriated to populate how ChatGPT and other generative AI generates content.
Yeah, that's a great point. And so specifically, you're talking about the training data, I believe,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point, Julia. And that, some of us, probably many of us have, maybe some stuff that we've published on the internet, and that was probably stuff that AI might have been trained on. So pretty much everything on the internet is fair game, and apparently a lot of other copyrighted stuff that might not be on the internet was apparently also fair game. And this, from what I've read, this seems to be true of pretty much all of the AI platforms that at least that we're publicly aware of. So yeah, that's a great point, Julia. And Laura in the chat says she has a concern over student learning and if they're actually learning the material or of course, just copying AI. I think that's a really good point. How many other folks have that concern about students and AI? Yeah. So yeah, at least two, three other, probably several of us. So here's a question: is it cheating? Yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, Laura points out, yeah, it depends on the instructions, and I believe you mean the in the syllabus, right? Yep. Yeah. And Debbie says, yeah, it's because it's not their original work. Yeah, that's a good point. So, if right now, if somebody, I think it's pretty clear that if a student were looking over the shoulder of another student and copying their work, or just flat out had somebody else do their work for them, or downloaded a paper from one of those online paper mill sites, that's clearly not their original work. But what if, what about when we use Google to research things? uh what about when we use like Grammarly, um or other tools like that? How is AI, can anybody kind of vocalize a little bit more about how AI is different, distinctly different, I guess, than any of these other tools that we we seem to allow?
Hmm.
Steve, I think when Google first came around, we weren't really focused a lot on how things appeared to us. The internet was just kind of this mash of information, and I think with AI and especially ChatGPT, we have the user interface is really built in, and we have a direct connection to our information. So it really, as far as the, what do you call it, the click count, it's way lower when you're using Chat GPT, or as opposed to Googling something.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Jamie. Yeah, even if we call AI a tool, it's kind of leaps and bounds different, right, than some of the other tools that we're used to, is in that you basically, your work is asking the right question, and almost everything else could potentially be done for you, whether it's answering your question accurately or if it's making something up. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I was trying to remember the name of that
Mhm.
that site, Chegg. Yeah, the
So,
bane of many people. Yeah. Sarah?
yeah, so what I'm noticing in a lot of the responses is that we have concerns over the intellectual processes that our students are bypassing through the use of generative AI, right? Being a good prompt generator is not what to our estimation, is not enough. We want them to think through the question asking at a different level, at a deeper level, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that, Sarah. And I mean, I think we're trying to get students to learn how to think and how to process information. And so if they're not going through those steps of learning and processing the information, because we're sending them out into the world and they're going to encounter complex problems, and we want them to be able to evaluate information and, look at it. And if AI does all that work for them, they're missing that. Could potentially be, I don't know for sure, but could potentially be missing that critical thinking piece.
Yep. And I'll just point out too that Dan, mentioned his concerns around privacy and surveillance. Yeah, and of course, I think we're all kind of, maybe, I guess, accustomed to some level of surveillance now, with carrying around basically wiretaps in our pockets all the time, cell phones. But this might bring it to a new level, and I might even want to tie this back to Julia's concerns earlier, right, about privacy and about intellectual property. So I don't know if folks have, you know, reviewed the terms of service for pretty much all of these AI services. But they pretty much all say anything that you type in, any information you give us, we can use that essentially for our business purposes, which business purposes means we're training the AI. So, yeah, excellent points. Yeah. So what about are there any other ethical concerns? What, there any, you know, what about, oh, here we go. Aaron, yeah.
A really good point, Aaron. I just sent an email this morning to some of our English colleagues about this because you know, our colleagues at other institutions are now disabling or choosing not to use the AI detection tools because of so many false positives where students are actually providing documentation that they did in fact write the assignment. So it creates a very difficult situation for all of you who are having those conversations with your students.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Aaron and Sarah. Yeah. Has anybody here had to confront the student about, you know, about work that they've submitted that was flagged as AI? Nobody has yet. How many folks have used, you know, either copy leaks or Turnitin? Okay, Elisa, would you mind sharing, you know, obviously without names or whatnot, but would you mind sharing your experience a little bit, Lisa, or?
Hey, I'm homesick, so I sound
Aw.
terrible and I apologize.
Oh,
But
sorry.
yes, I have. It really hasn't been a confrontation yet because each time that I have brought this up to a student, they have indeed used AI to cheat. And so they don't really fight me on it. What I do is I check previous writing that they've submitted and I see if, you know, if it comes up like 75, 100%, then I know, excuse me, I know that I need to go back and check prior writing. And when I do, and I see there's a disparity, then I know I have to confront the student. And it's always worked out well for me.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, thank you for sharing, Lisa. Especially not feeling well. Thank you for that. No, that's a great
Yeah. And you're in
example.
a luxurious position as an English instructor, right, Lisa? Because you have a corpus of student writing that you
This
can
is true.
refer
Yeah.
to. And we do have a number of instructors like you who have significant amount of writing assignments that maybe it's possible to do that check, although that's extra work on your part. But we also have instructors who maybe just assign a couple of major writing assignments each semester. And I really feel like those instructors are in a worse position because they may not feel as comfortable looking at those as other examples of student writing, right? If it's just a discussion post here or a short assignment there, it's not the same amount of reference.
That's true. It might be a good idea for them to assign something early in the semester,
Yeah.
even if it's just, you know, a half to a page long, something short done in the classroom would give them a reference point.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, Steve, before we move on, refresh your Google slide and let's see if what I've been trying to capture in the notes shows up on your end.
Oh, I'm sorry. I downloaded.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah, sorry
No,
about
no
that.
worries.
I could
Yeah,
do a quick.
We'll share it out though, because I've got these as a bulleted list. So for people who want to look at it later, that'll be good.
Okay, yeah.
Thanks.
So yeah, I think we're probably maybe another minute or so, then we should move on. I just wanted to, you know, note just from my own experience. So when Sarah, Ben, Hardy, and you know, a few of us were testing AI, I think, or I'm sorry, not AI, but the Turnitin AI detection system. A couple of things that I submitted, it actually flagged chunks of that as AI generated when I swear I wrote it myself. Although, sometimes I can't get those CAPTCHA tests, when I'm trying to log into a website. So I don't know, maybe I am part AI, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, it's it's a real issue as folks, Aaron and Sarah and several people on the distance learning email thread have pointed out recently, those false positives. Yeah, and Mary has a good point, that talking about chemistry, just we should keep in mind this, these tools, so this method, even though right now, large language models and, kind of, writing, as far as natural language writing is most of what we see, there isn't any limitation as far as this. It's the training data set. So I've seen AI tools that can manipulate math problems. They're not, not quite as far along maybe as English, but I've definitely seen things where you can give it essentially a like a calculus problem or something, and it would, solve it. Of course, there's been other systems for that as well, but I just want to point out, even though we're thinking about English and kind of essays and things, it's very possible that it's branching out, in particular, programming. Yeah, and yeah, Sarah put a great summary of the issues that we just discussed here. Yeah, thank you for that, Sarah. So if we're ready, Sarah, do you think we're ready to go to the next slide?
I think so, yeah.
Steve, you should probably take the Turing test at some point to make sure you are human.
I'm afraid. I want to be able to log into websites still, Okay, here we go. So you guys knew it was coming, right? So this is so Sarah and I asked the same question to AI. And I'm just gonna, leave this up here, but it's touched on several of the things that we talked about. There's a few things though. Is there anything in there that we can see that we didn't discuss? I can see a couple of things. Yeah. Yeah, so bias, yeah.
Bias, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I would note something interesting that, I didn't even really look it up until I did the slide, but knowing that there'd be a bunch of English teachers and librarians on this, I did as much as I could to properly cite. And it was interesting that, if you look at MLA and APA, seems like they're kind of in flux a little bit about AI citations. Like there wasn't necessarily a specific, style specifically for AI. But one thing that both did say is that you should not cite AI as the author, which I thought was interesting. But I don't know, Julia, if you have any feedback on that, but
No, I was just curious because I haven't actually looked into it other than just kind of with a side eye, because I feel like I'm kind of waiting for things to settle down, but I'm curious about that, not citing AI as an author. Did they say just leave the author out? Yeah, that makes sense, I guess, sort of. Although, yeah, it's muddy.
I did a search and I asked ChatGPT to provide citations, including links to where it got the information from. And then I went and checked all the links and verified that the information that it shared was accurate to those pages. So at that point, I mean, it was really like just the person who showed me where to go. And that would be an interesting citation. Like I would cite those websites, of course, and then I would probably just parenthetically say guidance from ChatGPT, provided these resources. So I would, within the text, probably just name that I use ChatGPT as a starting place for getting those resources.
You had it do a search for resources or for
I was looking for specific colleges that that had a certain feature in their employee benefits. And so I asked ChatGPT, because 4 will scrape live websites. I was like, go find me community colleges that do this particular thing with their employee benefits, and then give me the websites so that I can go to the links. And it did. So then I was able to check and make sure that all those were correct.
Yeah, that additional step seems important because, you know, I've definitely read things where when ChatGPT is asked to create citations, it creates fake ones.
Mhm.
And then it doesn't correspond to any actual article.
Right.
Yeah, that's great. And let me just notes on the slide, and I thought, you know, it might be a little difficult to see over Zoom, but the blue source that's highlighted, that was the only source that ChatGPT, or actually, I'm sorry, this response was from Google Bard. So I should point that out. So all of us have access right now to Bard, which is Google's current competitor to ChatGPT. If you just go to bard.google.com, and on its own, it is providing sources. I think that's maybe part of Google's, yeah, Google is trying to get out in front of it. But the only source it cited was a PowerPoint presentation that was published 8 years ago. And I did see a lot of this information on there, but it wasn't phrased, you know, it wasn't quoting from there. It was kind of paraphrasing. So I thought that was interesting. I mean, number one, I thought it was interesting that it gave me a PowerPoint from 8 years ago and not something more current. But I thought it was interesting. I kind of liked the way it summarized what was on that slide. If you go to that slide, there's a lot, or that PowerPoint deck, there's a lot of other stuff there. So that was just kind of interesting. But yeah, that very bottom citation. So that's my attempt at doing the MLA citation for, you know, the prompt that I did. And you could see, I mean, the first thing that it says to do is put the exact prompt, you know, that you put in. So that, you know, something to consider for your students maybe. But yeah, I think Sarah brought us down a great path by pointing out, you know, you can ask it. If it doesn't give you citations, you can ask it. But then, yeah, Julie was on point because a lot of times it will just lie. But it seems to be getting a little bit better. So I had one slider. So does anybody have any other comments about this slide, or before we move to the next one? Okay. So this is just a follow-up. So
I already answered that first question.
yeah. Does anybody have any thoughts? You know, feel free to answer either one of these, but you know, I mean, basically the premise is, you know, what if we, instead of asking the group for their thoughts, what if we just, you know, what if Sarah and I just displayed AI's response first? Or what if we just asked AI first? You know, what would our discussion have been like?
I don't like the idea of talking about AI's responses first, just because, especially as we're trying to build relationship with each other, like it seems more valuable to me to start with our own ideas. And, you know, we did forget things, but then we were able to circle back to them after we reflected on AI's responses. But, you know, those are my thoughts.
I want to agree with you, Julia. I've talked to professionals outside of teaching who don't have such a strong hold on their intellectual property, and the feel is a little different. You know, like one example, I was talking to a medical professional who was like, look, if I can grab a database or access like this huge corpus of knowledge that's outside of me and start from there, why wouldn't I do that first? Wouldn't that be a better starting place than just my singular knowledge base? And I understand that perspective. So when you're in the role of a professional and you have access to this huge collection of knowledge, and you can start there, and then as the expert sift through what's going to be most appropriate for your patient or whatever, I do understand why people are tempted to start with AI.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it definitely depends on the application, right? Like if we have a low stakes conversation, that's one thing.
Right.
But if we're in a professional situation where we're trying to produce a body of work or make a decision, that's a different application.
Yeah. And how many
Yeah.
of us have been in conversation with somebody and gotten stuck and go, let me Google that, right? Like we'll start the conversation and then we turn to technology to support us.
Yeah, definitely. I want to second, what Sarah is mentioning there. So I've been kind of going around and talking with a lot more folks purposely about this and kind of engaging with, maybe a lot of younger technology professionals and a few, different professional networking groups, and they're doing exactly what Sarah is saying. And it's not, and I appreciate Lisa's comment about, it depends on the purpose, because if you're talking about medicine, I mean, that, that might make sense, or, like a specialized subject area. But to give you a sense, so I've been in at least 3 or 4, purposeful brainstorming sessions where people are brainstorming for, and in most of these cases, it was about a new business, about people coming up with software systems and things for a business that they're considering. One case, I think it was a essentially like a restaurant, like a specialized restaurant. And so, we were to meet at a certain place, at a bar. And, we were going to talk about this was the purpose to talk about, and also in a library. And people, they immediately went to, let's do AI first. And I was bothered by that, but these folks, and I don't know exactly their ages, but they're, close to your students' ages. So it was interesting.
And
A lot
this
of
would be
things,
something,
sorry.
go ahead, Jamie.
Like a lot of things, I mean, it depends on the context and the purpose as well, right? I mean, because I mean, if you're using it in a way that you want to steer the entire conversation, that you're trying to place some kind of bias or relevance in the conversation, that's one thing. But if it's used for an icebreaker, I think it's all a spectrum on how you begin with it. I mean, it's tricky because people are going to decide pretty quickly whether they agree with what you're saying or whether they want to take it a different direction.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know. I just, I think all of us, I mean, I think generally we all appreciate original thought, right? We appreciate our own original thoughts and other people's, and, you just got to wonder over time, how will that work? Yeah. So yeah, Laura brings up a good point, that younger folks are just used to that. So yeah, it
I
could
mean,
be that, yeah.
I see that at home with my kids, right? So I want them to think about something. So I ask them and they're like, well, why would I do that? I'll just Google it, so they're just used to it. And they started doing that at a young age because they've had access to this their whole time. So maybe for them, I mean, and then after the pandemic, they've got so used to being online students. So I don't know, their view of AI, I don't know, it's not the same as ours.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. Yeah, I'll just mention, one thing, I guess, just to throw in there, and I'm going to go to the next slide here so we could look at this. But, what about, employers? So if we're, kind of responsible for, preparing these students for the future, employers right now, a lot of them, whether for the good or the bad, but they're expecting folks to, be willing to grab onto this technology and use it. So yeah, that's something. So maybe that's, maybe there isn't a negative there. Maybe that is something that is going to be happening. But anyway, so this slide here is just kind of, I think, where we're at as a college. And most of the stuff, we've already kind of talked about either in previous IT announcements or some of these sessions with Sarah and folks. But please don't send any confidential or sensitive information to an AI platform. It's the same as you don't want to put, you wouldn't want your social security number to be put on a website that's not secure or sent in an email, because email isn't necessarily secure. But in particular with these AI platforms right now, they're telling you, hey, whatever you give us, we're going to do whatever we want with that. And there's been several cases where data has leaked from that. So please don't do any sensitive or send any sensitive information to AI. And this also goes for folks that might be using Otter AI or any of those transcription services. Be respectful of people in meetings, because if you're going to be in a meeting where there might be some sensitive information discussed, that's something that really you'd want to get at least consent from folks ahead of time, or make sure they're aware of. And then, of course, accuracy. And this, of course, I know a lot of folks, we're not necessarily using this ourselves a lot yet, but over time we probably will be. But I think that we should just take the stance that even though we're using this tool, it's still us producing it. So like, I think there's at least one lawyer out there that regrets not proofreading what AI provided them. And yeah, and then the bottom item there is just copyright, because even though AI is designed to produce quote unquote original content, as Julia and multiple people mentioned, is that it's trained on data, on copyrighted works. And there have been cases where it's basically produced a response. I'm thinking more of image services where you ask it, come up with the logo or come up with something. So you just really can't assume that anything that AI is giving you is something that you would have the right to then use down the road. So that's it. Yeah. So Sarah, did you have anything to close? Oh, I think you're muted.
Yeah, sorry, thanks. I know we're a little over our time. I know that these recommendations seem general. I think what you're hearing from Steve and me is that, we're aware that there's no hard and fast answers for a lot of this, and we just need to continue to be in communication and in collaboration with each other and navigate this together as a college. But there are some guiding principles like those recommendations that we can start from and then have some more specific conversations around. Yeah, we've got a little thank you note in the chat if you haven't seen that yet, and I've got a link for an eval. So if you take a minute and fill that out for us, that's really helpful. And we just want to thank you for being part of the ongoing discussion around AI as we all continue to learn more.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Yeah, thanks for being with us. We've got another session to wrap us up this semester next week, so look for that. Talk to you soon.
Bye.